At the end of the holiday, the golden earth is no longer golden. It changes its face and becomes a flat new green. Not a single wheat is left. They are cut down by farmers one by one, threshold one by one, dried in the sun, and handed over to the nation. Farmers do not know where the nation is or what the nation is, but they know that the nation is a being, a designated, large, omnipresent, yet innate being. What does this being look like? Farmers can't imagine it. It carries the mystique of legend and oral transmission. That is, it is in mouths, at least in the mouths of some people. But one thing farmers can be sure of, the nation is an endpoint. The endpoint of wheat, rice, soybeans, rapeseed, cotton, and corn. Wherever the grain goes, that place is the nation. Compared with one village, the commune is the nation, and to the commune, the county party committee has become the nation. In short, nation is both absolute and relative. It is composed of distance, and at the same time contains a progressive relationship, that is, the relationship between above and below. Nation is on top, it's expecting. Not only does it expect wheat, but it also expects rice. Therefore, after the wheat harvest, farmers turn the original brightly golden into the current oily green. On the same piece of land, farmers use their own hands to plant the seedlings one by one. Around the summer solstice, the middle rice is almost finished, and the rainy season comes. Very punctual. On the surface, it is just a coincidence, but it is not. It was summed up by farmers in their thousands of years of work, and it was the choice of farmers, which implied the great wisdom of farmers from generation to generation. In the work of farmers from generation to generation, they understand the sky, and they also understand the earth. In the relationship between sky and earth, farmers have sought to survive. Through their wisdom, the sky and the earth become as coordinated as the left arm and the right arm, like grinding tofu, just like grinding out the days. Of course, grinding tofu for the nation. When the wheat was harvested, Shen Cuizhen had more thoughts. As mothers, they always have endless thoughts. One is done and another one adds, and it will always be about children endlessly. Shen Cuizhen's thought was of course Duanfang. Say that 2 years ago her biggest thought was to see Duanfang go to high school. Why did she stick to it? For a reason, it was a task she had to accomplish. Duanfang's biological father was a high school graduate. Before he died, he left a message for Cuizhen to let his 2 children finish high school. This is his last word. In general, the last words are orders, and there is no room for bargaining. Last words are always a double-edged sword, very sharp for those who speak them, and also very sharp for those who hear them. Over the years, Shen Cuizhen's life has actually come from the blade of this sword. Duanzhong is still young, let's not talk about him yet. Duanfang has finished high school anyway, so there is infinite relief here. Shen Cuizhen looked at Duanfang in the wheat field and let out a long sigh of relief. Shen Cuizhen stared at Duanfang from afar, lost her mind, and there was a burst of moisture from nowhere in her eyes. Shen Cuizhen was not sad, but happy, a kind of very thorough and soft happiness. Duanfang finally graduated from high school. He is so big, half a head taller than his dead dad, and it could be said that her mother's merits are perfect. When Wang Cunliang is not at home, Shen Cuizhen must buy a few queries of paper and cry seriously by the river. Thinking of this, Shen Cuizhen had strength in her heart and strength in her hands. However, Shen Cuizhen suddenly came to a realization that Duanfang had grown up, which meant that in a blink it is time to start a family and start a business. Thinking of this, Shen Cuizhen's hands softened again. A new thought has come. Yes, It's time to arrange a marriage for him. It seems that her thoughts for Dunfang are not over yet, and she still has to endure them. The road is still long, and the days are still long. From the time of planting the seedlings to the beginning of fall on August the 8th or 7th of the Gregorian calendar, this period is the give-in period for farmers. The so-called give-in period, to put it bluntly, is the time between summer harvest and fall harvest. Farmers can take advantage of this time to take a breath and save some energy for the next fall harvest. Because it is summer, farmers call these days rest in summer. But rest in summer doesn't mean that farmers have actually rest. No. Generally speaking, matchmakers will use this free time to walk around, help young men and women to talk about marriage, tie them up, and build bridges so that they can have dates and give wedding gifts in winter. Therefore, although rest in summer are leisure days, for young men and women it is a busy time and becomes a heart-moving moment. Of course, those professional matchmakers have been swept away after 1949. They don't work, they just rely on a mouth and forcefully match each other, eating the benefits of the man and then the benefits of the woman, which is undoubtedly exploitation, belongs to the parasitic class. There was a saying in the old society that they were called little career, which was one of the 360 careers, a job after all. The new society knocked down all the parasites, and the professional matchmaker died out on its own. However, this does not mean that there will be no matchmakers. On the contrary, there are more. Everyone can do it. The wives of those cadres, those women teachers in the countryside, they don't need to work on the farms. Their hands and feet are free, and all their diligence is concentrated on their lips. Besides talking about household affairs, they are definitely matchmakers. Of course, this is only the general case. In fact, many aged women have private desires to be matchmakers and have a little secret and a weird passion. They like to match people. They look at a young man a few times and their hearts become more alive. They look at a big girl a few times and their hearts become more at ease. They feel that they are suitable. So they catch the man trying their best to talk about the benefits of the girl, and then catch the girl relentlessly talking about the strength of the man. It doesn't matter if it succeeds or not. If it does, it will be their credit. To ask for wedding wine is just secondary. The key is having a successful example, so they naturally have a reputation, which is equivalent to a good start for the next matchmaking. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. There's a line of the man and a line of the woman. They are still there, matching elsewhere. There is also another situation, that is, the man and the woman have been flirting with each other for a while, have kissed in private, and even hiding in haystacks or wheat fields to do bad things, the so-called bad things. To put it bluntly, good things. It's just that women are accustomed to saying bad things, while men all say good things. Whether it's a bad thing or a good thing, there is one point. If you don't do this kind of thing, it's okay. Once done, you will be addicted to it. The more you do it, the more you want it. The wish is dark right after breakfast, then go to bed right after. If there is something in the girl's belly, how to deal with it? They complain to each other at a loss, then get a decent person to match them up. Such a matchmaker is the easiest, just to eat a ready meal, drink a ready wine, and all done. Such matchmakers are also the easiest to flatter. If you don't flatter, you are unkind. If you're unkind, she is unjust. As soon as her mouth turns, she turns into a machine gun, tooting a shuttle, shaking out all your scandals, and it's too late to cover your face with your shorts. When Shen Cuizhen had nothing to do, her mind was full of the girls in the village. She had them line up in her mind and sifted one by one in her heart. Are there any good girls? Yes, but Shen Cuizhen still felt that they were unworthy, either lacking pound here or ounce there. It is always unsatisfactory. It's not that the mother is proud and arrogant. For a guy like Duanfang, besides her Cuizhen, who can give birth to a second one? Right there. If you don't believe it, open your eyes and look slowly. When it comes to choosing a wife for his son, it cannot be sloppy at all. First, she must be worthy of her son, and second, she must be worthy of her mother-in-law. Otherwise, trouble will come after marrying. The days before were wheat harvesting and rice planting. Cuizhen had not been able to free up her hands, but now that it is over, rest in summer, since she has time, Shen Cuizhen starts her work. In the afternoon of this day, Cuizhen went out to buy soy sauce with a bottle, walked around, and walked to the back of the house of Wang Yougao, the accountant of the brigade. Cuizhen hoped to meet Big Braid. Big Braid is the wife of the accountant of the brigade. She is in her 40s, and she still has a big braid like a little girl, dragging it all the way to her waist. In summer, when Big Braid is lazy, her head will be a little rancid. Those talkative women would say to Big Braid, "Big Braid, at such an age, dragging on such a big tail, aren't you annoyed? Aren't you irritable?" Big Braid would always answer, "He doesn't." There was helplessness in her voice. The so-called "he" is her man, the brigade accountant, Wang Yougao. He doesn't. There's a secret that is hard to be guessed by outsiders. When Wang Yougao is doing sexual intercourse, he likes to tug at his wife's long braid and wrap it around his wrist. When his hand tenses up, his body exerts its strength. This is completely a strange problem with no sense. But he just likes it. Big Braid's hair is pulled on the arm of his man, and it hurts so much that she wants to scream, but she can't, so she has to hold it. Occasionally screaming, but it is particularly exciting, with a different kind of taste. It is indescribable. After the birth of the eldest daughter, Big Braid cut her braid once, and it is a new style of short hair, spotty head, and heroic appearance. Big Braid thought it was very fashionable, but she didn't expect her new hairstyle to be an unexpected blow to the brigade accountant, and Wang Yougao wilted on the bed, very angry. At a critical moment, he only knew to bite. Big Braid has since learned that the long braid cannot be cut, so she started to grow again. Speaking of which, Big Braid thanked her long braid from the bottom of her heart, and it was her long braid that helped her hold her man. For a while, Yougao became obsessed with gambling and secretly fell in love with Paigao. Big Braid knew it. Without saying anything, she suddenly dragged her man off the poker table, dragged him all the way to his house, dragged him all the way to the bedside, picked up the scissors and put them behind her head, saying, "If you bet again, I'll clean it up. I'll let you sleep with a nun every day." Yougao was weak and said, "It's just to play. See how lucky I am. How is it a real gamble?" Big Braid saw the appearance of her man and knew it in her heart. She got confidence in her heart, then went forward in her mouth, and said, "Playing is not allowed. If your hands are itchy, I'll brush them for you." Yougao said, "Not allowed it, not allowed. I just don't play. What are you doing with the weapon?" Big Braid is fierce, but while treating her man, she has her own experience. As long as you arrange things in bed, everything else is easy. Big Braid has the wisdom of Big Braid and understands the truth. Never let a man get hairy in bed. The so-called men are soft-hearted, afraid of wives, and intimidating, which are all false. In the final analysis, men are greedy in bed. A big man, if he is not greedy in bed, no matter how good a woman is, she can't hold him. Even angels are useless. That's the reason. Carrying the soy sauce bottle, Shen Cuizhen turned 3 or 4 corners and came to the door of Big Braid's house. Across the courtyard wall, she heard the sound of the sewing machine. She knew Big Braid is at home. Shen Cui-zhen shouted at the door, "Big Braid!" Big Braid got off the sewing machine and saw that Shen Cui-zhen had already entered the door. Shen Cui-zhen put the soy sauce bottle on the floor tiles on the patio, held it steady, and said, "Big Braid, there are a few pieces of tattered cloth at home, and I'm too lazy to take a needle. Please help me when you have time." Big Braid smiled. "Bring them." Shen Cui-zhen said, "I don't have any money for you, so I'll ask my third child to get you some eggs." Big Braid said, "It's okay, bring them." After saying hello, Shen Cui-zhen sat firmly in the main room, sitting up straight just in front of Big Braid. Looking around, she inspected the home of Big Braid and praised that Big Braid was skillful, and the house was clean and shiny. Big Braid heard it. Shen Cui-zhen didn't seem to be here to fix her clothes. She was begging her for something. For no reason, what does she flatter me for? Then welcome. Big Braid said, "I forgot to boil water in the morning, and I don't have any water for you to drink." Cui-zhen said that she was now thirsty, and her eyes began to study the sewing machine of Big Braid again, thinking in her heart, how to say it. Cui-zhen complimented a few words on the sewing machine, so good, and suddenly said, "Oh my God, if any girl wants a sewing machine as a dowry gift from our family, how can I afford it?" Big Braid is a delicate woman, but misunderstood. She thought that Duanfang had taken a fancy to their eldest daughter, and that she had a sewing machine in her family, so naturally she would not ask for this betrothal gift. Big Braid said, "Why are you panicking? Duanfang just graduated." Cui-zhen said, "Big Braid, he is not young. It's not like you don't know the situation of our family. Duanfang went to school late, and he's almost 20. Big Braid got even more sure. Her heart was determined, but her mouth was doubly vague, and she said, "It's so fast, really." Cui-zhen hurriedly said, "Yes, the shithead has been pushed to the buttocks." Hearing Cui-zhen saying this, Big Braid dared not hide it anymore. The shit has been pushed to the buttocks, and the next step must be to seize the ditch. Big Braid decided to immediately put the words to the fore. Big Braid said, "Sister, it's not that I don't save your face. You don't know my girl. She's spoiled by her dad so much. You tell me, does she look like a person?" Shen Cui-zhen was stunned for a long time, and then she understood. Big Braid is messed up. Although her self-esteem was hurt, Shen Cui-zhen complained about Big Braid with her eyes, saying, "Big Braid, just me. How can I have the courage to think about it? It seems that I can tell the difference between leeks and barley. Even if the 5 fingers are the same length, Duanfang does not deserve to be a Big Braid's son-in-law." Shen Cui-zhen bowed over her upper body, patted her knees, and whispered, "You talk well, and you're decent, so I am asking you to find one. If there is a suitable one, help us find one randomly." Big Braid understood. The branch was so far away that it even went to the magpie nest in the treetop. She was embarrassed and said quickly, "Cui-zhen, really? Like the mouth of a rabbit, had a gap when you open your mouth. Duanfang is such a good guy, the unique one in one village. Girls are not blind. You don't have to worry. You can count on Big Braid." Shen Cui-zhen couldn't close her mouth and smiled by herself. As long as she hears someone praise Duanfang's goodness, it's simply a compliment of hers, like the mouthful of rocky candies melt and flow to her heart. Shen Cui-zhen kept closing her lips, but she couldn't, and her voice was lower. She was very polite and modest, and said, "Duanfang is average. He's just like this. He's normal." Saying this, Big Braid stood up. Shen Cui-zhen came to the door, turned her head, and said to Big Braid, "Big Braid, I'll be cheeky and count on you." Big Braid said, "Sit down. You didn't even drink water." Shen Cui-zhen was still smiling, still saying "Now Thursday," and bent down to get a soy sauce bottle. She thought to herself, "Your daughter is greedy and lazy, and her inner world is not good. Besides her dad being the brigade accountant, what else? You big beard don't want it. How come you think about it? Don't talk about our family. I don't even like her. You think about it." Shen Cuizhen was busy working for Dunfang in private, but Dunfang didn't know it, so he was very leisurely. In fact, Dunfang's leisure is false, and it may be more appropriate to say that he is depressed. Something in his heart, quite serious, is unrequited love. A few days ago, the farm work was too busy for Dunfang to take care of. But now that he is free, a girl's face began to dangle back and forth in Dunfang's mind. She is a girl from Zhongbao town, Dunfang's high school classmate, Zhao Jie. Dunfang and Zhao Jie have been classmates for 2 years, but it's actually nothing. But Dunfang always cares about her shining eyebrows and her shining smile. There's nothing else. Talking in detail, in Zhongbao High School, it is really impossible for boys and girls to make trouble. Why? Zhongbao High School has a very good tradition. Boys and girls never speak, let alone any contact. No one has requirements or regulations, but everyone consciously sustains and maintains such a tradition as soon as they enter the school. Therefore, the school discipline is very good, and there is never an accident. The most outrageous behavior is only the same. That is, the male classmate's unreserved nocturnal emission for the female classmate in the middle of the night. This is easy. Just wash it and it's clean. Unexpectedly, when graduation was approaching, no one knows who came up with the idea. He bought a hard-sided notebook and asked his classmates to leave messages to each other. Although it only took 3 or 4 days, the boundaries between boys and girls were suddenly broken, and everyone seemed to be drinking chicken blood, and they were so excited that they didn't even know what to do. Dunfang didn't buy a notebook and became more and more depressed. He believed that Zhao Jie would not write anything for him. She was so proud that she didn't take a good look at Dunfang for 2 years. Every time she looked at Dunfang, Zhao Jie had to move her arrogant chin away, which made him sad. In fact, Dunfang knew the truth that he couldn't reach Zhao Jie. Apart from wet dreams, he couldn't think of any effective way. Good news comes with Spring Sender. On the last afternoon, Zhao Jie surprisingly handed her notebook to Dunfang right next to the school's blackboard news. Dunfang was caught off guard and almost lost his mind. Zhao Jie was natural. She certainly knew Dunfang's thought. No matter how stupid a girl is, she has enough computing power for a young man's eyes. Not to mention that Zhao Jie is not stupid at all. Zhao Jie walked all the way to Dunfang, even ready to smile, and said, "Oh, classmate, I'm waiting for you." Dunfang's soul was gone. After being stunned for a long time, he understood Zhao Jie's intentions, took the pen, sighed at the tip of the pen, and tried the pen in his palm, which was very smooth. But Dunfang's smoothness ended there. His brain was blocked by something, and he didn't know what to write. Before the pen moved, there were already thousands of words in his heart. It is not accurate to say 1,000 words. The most appropriate situation should be called 1,000 threads. Dunfang wrote a Zhao Jie, which was too neat and dull. Not good. Tore it up and rewrote it. Too scribbled. Even worse. And tore it up again. Dunfang's handwriting is what Dunfang is most proud of, and he has always been able to use them. When Dunfang was about to write it for the 3rd time, something unfortunate happened. The 2 pages he tore off happened to be joined by the inscriptions of the principal and the director. If it is torn on one side, the other side will naturally fall off. Zhao Jie looked at the 2 pages of paper on the floor and said politely, "It's fine." She was already unhappy. Dunfang looked at it, turned his face sideways, and pointed the tip of his nose at a huge slogan on the poster. The slogan was black with 6 bold characters written with a giant brush. Reversal of the case is unsatisfaction, followed by 3 huge exclamation marks. That's what Chairman Mao Zedong said when he criticized Deng Xiaoping after the Qingming Festival. Duanfang saw that the 3 exclamation marks turned into 3 holes and hit him. Boom, boom, boom! The little hope that had just appeared was just shattered. He returned the notebook to Zhao Jie, heartbroken, and said, "I'll be sorry for you all my life. Nothing is relevant." In fact, Duanfang's graduation message to Zhao Jie was not completed. Zhao Jie didn't mention it, so Duanfang can't say anything. Just graduated. It's really a pity. Until he returned to Wang village, Duanfang kept thinking that if he hadn't torn the 2 pages, what would Duanfang have written under Zhao Jie? Duanfang can't think of it. This is the saddest part of Duanfang. Duanfang's thought can't be explained clearly in 1 or 2 sentences, but even if he can't say it clearly, it would be nice to leave a trace in her notebook. Even if you leave a signature, it is a thought, and there's a place to stay when you look back on the past. Duanfang didn't. This opportunity will never come. Duanfang is not only sorry for Zhao Jie, but also has irreversible regret on his own side. Duanfang's regret was an arrow that pierced through Duanfang's heart. Once thinking, there's a hole. What would I write? This afternoon, Duanfang squatted under the big locust tree and asked the ants beside the roots. The ants didn't say anything, but the more they gathered, the more crowded they got, the darker they got. Duanfang's mind quickly shifted from Zhao Jie to the ants' side. They used the roots as a square, and in the square they were crowded, as if they had some urgent notice. They were gathered, organized, and they were holding a huge parade. It's such a hot day. What are they busy with? Looking like a group of anger. They are very active, very engaged, very excited. What is it for? It's almost crazy hot, but even more crazy are the ants. They don't have a united goal, but they line up according to a fixed route. Some rush from left to right, the other rush from the right to left. You step on me, I step on you, whizzing away and whizzing close. Duanfang finally got tired of seeing it and looked around. No one was there. He immediately took out the thing from his crotch, aimed at the army of ants, and peed. The ant nest exploded, and a handful of them fled desperately, but more of them immediately fell into the vast ocean. This is the real vast ocean, wide, boundless, and deep. Duanfang aimed at the fleeing ants, stalking and chasing them, and the hazardous situation rolled over wherever they fled. Duanfang was intact at all, and in a blink he fought a beautiful battle of annihilation. When it was over, Duanfang glanced at it, raised his legs, and left. Where to go? It's a problem. On such hot noon, farmers usually hide at home. However, the village was empty, and there was not even a person to talk with. Under the sun, Duanfang was full of energy but bored, so he could only pull his slippers and start swaying. The ground in the alley had been loosened by the sun, and the floury dust floated on the road. Duanfang's slippers were like 2 horses' hoovers, and the dust flew when he stepped. This was interesting. Duanfang simply went barefoot and ran wildly in the alley with his slippers in hand. The alley was too short, so Duanfang began to turn back and forth, and after 4 or 5 trips, the dust in the alley was flying, as if thousands of troops, like a big scene. Duanfang was quite satisfied with his behavior, sweaty on his head. It was the joy of achievement. Unexpectedly, Sanya's mother, Kong Su-zhen, suddenly appeared at this time. Kong Suzhen was carrying the basket, looked at Duanfang, and said with a smile, "Duanfang, you're pretty good at playing." Duanfang was startled for a moment, then turned to look at Kong Suzhen. His face flushed with shame. He then looked at the ground. There were crooked footprints all over the ground. They were Duanfang's footprints. Kong Suzhen smiled and walked away, and the alley was empty again. Sparse. Duanfang was no longer interested, looking at his figure on the ground. It was thick and short, like a monster. The sun was surging, flying straight down, but it was all silent. It was standard midsummer noon, and it was as silent as sweat on the forehead. Duanfang sighed, narrowed his eyes, and glanced at the end of the alley. The end of the alley was a concrete bridge. The cement slabs were scorched by the midday sun, blazing a white flame. With nowhere to go, Duanfang wrote with his toe under the sun, 赵杰 and a colon. It was eventually erased. Turning around, he was dangling to the cooperative medical care. The barefoot doctor Wang Xinglong was there. He, the barefoot doctor, was not barefoot, very comfortable, and was squatting on the ground to wash the salt water bottle. Xinglong had just taken a nap, and the left half of his face was clearly printed with the lines of the straw mat. Seeing Duanfang coming, Xinglong looked very happy, smiled with his mouth closed, and there were a pair of happy dimples on both sides of his cheeks. He glanced at the injury on Duanfang's leg, which had formed a purple scab. It looks like there won't be any more problems. Xinglong shook the water in his hands, opened the cabinet, took out a salt water bottle, and handed it to Duanfang. Duanfang didn't know why Xinglong asked him to drink the injection, so he didn't take it. Xinglong's face was very ghostly. He pulled out the rubber stopper of the saltwater bottle, and a string of white foam immediately spewed out from the mouth of the bottle. Xinglong said, "Take a sip." Duanfang threw away his slippers and took it, but it was soda. This was so unexpected. Duanfang smiled and said, "Why do you have soda?" Xinglong said proudly, "I made it myself." Xinglong added, "It's actually very simple. Boil the water first, wait for it to cool, pour the citric acid in it, and add soda. That's it. It's very simple." Duanfang took the saltwater bottle, drank it slowly, and said, "Where did you learn it from?" Xinglong said, "The army." Xinglong said slowly, "I was a hygienist in the army. I didn't learn how to treat a patient, and I didn't learn how to shoot a gun. I learned how to make soda." Duanfang was drinking, listening, and suddenly burped. Xinglong said, "Listen to me, Duanfang. What are you dangling about? Be a soldier. With your conditions, you can get a rifle to play with, or a pistol to play with if you are good." Before Duanfang answered, he heard a movement from the next door, the sound of a harmonica. Duanfang said, "Who is it?" Xinglong replied angrily, "Who else could it be? The demon of the world." Duanfang knew that it was an educated youth from Nanjing, so he planned to go for a chat with the saltwater bottle. Xinglong caught up, lowered his voice, and said, "Drink up. Go after you finish drinking." The dormitory of the educated youth was originally a large warehouse. At most, 7 or 8 male educated youths lived there, and it was lively for a while. But now there is only Demon left alone. Demon was lying on the ground with a straw mat. Demon had his head rested on his arm, and his left leg crossed on his right. There was only a pair of shorts all over him. With his eyes closed, he held the harmonica in one hand, and he strummed brokenly, on and off. Duanfang came in, and because he was barefoot, there was no sound. Demon closed his eyes. The harmonica was still pulling like a saw on his mouth, but his heart was lyrical. His appearance was endlessly enjoyable, with his eyebrows moving. Dunfang didn't bother him and lay down in front of him. His head rested on his arm, the left leg was crossed on the right leg, and one foot was dangling in the air. After listening for a while, the sound of the harmonica stopped. Demon sat up, pushed Dunfang's feet away, and said, "No wonder, so stinky." Dunfang said, "Your feet also stink." Demon's accent didn't change at all. It still sounded like a Nanjing accent. It sounded nice. Dunfang stared at Demon for a long time and always felt that something was wrong with his face. Found it eventually, it was the mouth. The corners of his mouth bulged out symmetrically, and he remembered that were calluses grounded by the harmonica all day long. Dunfang and Demon just sat there, wanting to say something, but couldn't. The big warehouse was quiet, but it was like a late night in the hot noon. It was a shining second half of the night, which was as quiet as a dream. A few mice slowly crawled out of the corner. They were arrogant, sniffing everywhere, and every tiny movement contained double preparations for advancing and escaping. Dunfang and Demon smiled and looked at the mice on the ground, like watching a movie. The mice were in groups of 3 or 5, and they became more and more daring, and they all walked up to Dunfang's toes, and their slender noses sniffed at Dunfang's stinky feet a few times, very disappointed. Dunfang played a prank and suddenly imitated mewing. The mice all bounced, scurrying around the warehouse, and finally, like bullets, they hit a hole in the corner accurately. The movie is over. The noontime is extremely quiet as night. There is movement. Through the door of the big warehouse, Dunfang saw 5 or 6 figures dangling over under the big sun. Very dazzling. They are Pei Quan, Da Lu, Guo Le, and Hong Qi. Pei Quan is their boss, which can be seen from the way they walk and the order in which they walk. It can also be seen that Da Lu and Guo Le are Pei Quan's most capable go-getters, and they belong to the roles of living and dying. Speaking of Pei Quan, he is too famous. Dunfang heard about this great ancestor as soon as he came to Wang Village. He had a glorious deed. It says that it was when Pei Quan was in the 5th grade of elementary school, Wang Village held a criticism meeting. Cow demons and snake spirits stood on the high rostrum in a long row. Mr. Gu was also in it. Who is Mr. Gu? A decentralized rightist, so his surname is not Wang, and he was a substitute in the school at that time. The denunciation meeting went well. Everyone was chanting slogans, but Pei Quan walked up to the rostrum quietly. The little thing rushed in front of Mr. Gu, pulled out the kitchen knife, and slammed into Mr. Gu's head. The blood on Mr. Gu's head did not flow out, but spurted out. Mr. Gu blinked a few times and fell down the rostrum. If Pei Quan had not a small strength, Mr. Gu's half head would have been cut off by him at least. For what? Just because Mr. Gu offended him in class. The sounding and wailing denunciation was cut to dead silence by Pei Quan's knife, and there was no voice at all. Mr. Gu finally saved his life, so he refused to go to that school. To this day, he still herds dogs in Wang Village. Occasionally encountering Pei Quan, Mr. Gu has to lower his head and avoid him like a snake. Pei Quan's knife left a frightening memory for Wang Village, and everyone was afraid of him. The old people in the village sighed with infinite sorrow, saying that Pei Quan was born at the wrong time. If he had been born 30 years earlier, Pei Quan would definitely be an anti-Japanese hero, one of the 6 heroes on Longya Mountain. Parents told their children again and again they must be kind to Pei Quan. Whoever is bad to Pei Quan will be bad. The fact is exactly like this. If anyone offends Pei Quan, he will not only offend Pei Quan but also offend Dalu Guole, and in a sense, offend the entire Wang village. Without Pei Quan showing up, your chickens will fly and your dogs will jump. It's not that Duanfang didn't flatter Pei Quan back then, but he did, but he couldn't. The reason is not complicated. Duanfang is not surnamed Wang. It is not okay but not to be surnamed Wang. Pei Quan said, unless you are my surname. So Duanfang kept avoiding him. Free outside of Wang village, fear at heart. Pei Quan entered the door, Dalu and Guole entered the door, and Hongqi they entered the door. Everyone was bareback, shirtless, and with a damp towel slung over their shoulders. In comparison, Hongqi was quite special. He was not shirtless, wearing a shirt uprightly, with 2 patches on his shoulders symmetrically on both sides. The stitches are quite neat and fine. At a glance, you can tell that his mother Kong Su-zhen is a very particular person. Hongqi was wearing a shirt, so his demeanor naturally lacked a bit of agility. Although he was the oldest in the group, you can tell at a glance that Hongqi was nothing, just a small sidekick, and belongs to the role of a minion. They walked into the big warehouse, but blocked the door. Only Pei Quan walked to Duanfang alone. Pei Quan poked Duanfang's ass with his toes, and Duanfang raised his head and looked at Pei Quan's face. Pei Quan said, I heard that you have the strength. Duanfang kept blinking. He looked back at Guole and remembered it. Yesterday afternoon he was bored, and in the barber shop he was arm wrestling with Guole. This is also a game often played by young people in the countryside. Guole lost, but surprisingly, Pei Quan took it seriously. Duanfang said, How come? Guole declined. Hongqi walked into the back room, took a bench, and placed it beside Pei Quan. Pei Quan squatted down, said nothing, and put his arm on the bench. He wanted arm wrestling. Duanfang smiled and said, Forget it. It's such a hot day. Pei Quan didn't want to forget it. He just held his arm like that, waiting. At this time, Hongqi took off the wet towel from Pei Quan's shoulder, folded it, and placed it under Pei Quan's arm. Duanfang wanted to leave, but turned around and looked at the door, knowing that he couldn't leave. Fuck. I didn't expect that arm wrestling causes such trouble. Duanfang didn't want to cause trouble and wanted to give in. Duanfang knows that Pei Quan has nothing else but likes others to give in. If you do, it's peaceful. Duanfang glanced at Hongqi and then at Dalu, and there was no expression on their faces. Duanfang was about to say something, but Guole smiled. Not a good smile, just at the corner of his mouth. Duanfang didn't like this kind of smile, so he turned around, stretched out his arms, and handed over. Pei Quan really had the strength. He grabbed it quickly, and he suddenly gained the upper hand. But Duanfang steadied. This stableness let Duanfang's confidence come up. He knew that Pei Quan had used all his strength, so he had a lion in his heart. He had already weighed Pei Quan's weight. Duanfang took a breath and pulled his arm back to the center. The 2 men's arms remained in the starting position, just stiff. Duanfang thought, if there is anything good or bad in the future, at least he won't suffer any loss in strength. The 2 held on for a minute or 2. Duanfang's face was very swollen, while Pei Quan's face was already purple. Duanfang knew that, as long as he exerted more strength, he would surely be able to press Pei Quan down. Of course, Duanfang didn't. That's what Duanfang wanted. Unexpectedly, Pei Quan made a bad move at this time, and he cut his nails into Duanfang's flesh. Duanfang's blood came out, red and dripping down. Duanfang looked at his own blood and felt happy. It is not even an exaggeration to describe it with raised eyebrows. There is only one reason for a person to think of a bad move. He knows that he can't do it. He has lost mentally. Dunfang held Pei Quan's hand extremely tightly, not letting go. He wants Pei Quan to give up first. If he didn't give up, Dunfang would stay with him until dawn the next day. The blood was still flowing along Dunfang's arm, all the way to the bench. Finally, Demon spoke, and Demon said, forget it, 1-1, forget it. Pei Quan was released, and Dunfang was also released. The hands of the two were full of each other's handprints. Pei Quan said, you're all right. He was praising Dunfang. Dunfang smiled and said nothing. He raised his arm, brought it to his mouth, and stuck out his tongue to lick the blood off the back of his hand. The tension melted away, and then there was excitement. They started to talk randomly. After the chat, the topic slowly came to eating. This is inevitable. The theme finally emerged, and the topic finally came together. This is the benefit of democratic centralism. Democratic centralism has a very natural order. Democracy first, then centralism. And the focus is not only on the topic, but also on the speaker. That is, a topic is concentrated on the mouth of a certain person. Now, Dunfang and Pei Quan have both quieted down and only left the demon talking. Instead of chatting, he turned it to a review and outlook on it, similar to a situation report. Demon is making a report. There is a special atmosphere in the empty warehouse. The only thing missing is the echo from the microphone. Demon's report focuses on Nanjing's popsicles. There are 4 kinds of popsicles. The light green ones are banana flavored. The orange ones are, of course, orange flavors. And the brown ones are not coffee flavored, but red beans. They cost 4 cents a piece, which is a penny cheaper than a 5-cent piece of cream popsicle. But the taste is not bad, maybe even better. When you take a bite, it will immediately freeze in your mouth, which can scare your tongue. Strictly speaking, the report of Demon is not a review of the past or an outlook of the future. As a Nanjing native, he has never eaten anything, nothing more than popsicles or stinky tofu. What to review about stinky tofu? There is little prospect of potential. However, it doesn't matter. To put it bluntly, reviewing the past and looking forward to the future is to make up stories. It tests none of your experience, but imagination and courage. The more imaginative and daring you are, the more wonderful and magical the story will be. Sometimes, the more something is created out of nothing, the closer it is to nothingness, the more meaningful the story is, and at the same time, the more real it is. Magic and nothingness mean the glory of the past, but also the more fascinating future. Those who speak are satisfied, and those who listen are even more satisfied. This is two-way nourishment, a common desire. Demon was saying and swallowing. Dunfang and the others were swallowing and listening. Eating. How wonderful, how dreamy, how unreachable. What is truly fascinating is precisely the seen unreachable, even unseen and unreachable. What's more delicious and more satisfying than the taste that can't be eaten? This just confirms an old saying of one village. Dragon meat is the freshest, and monk tongue's meat is the sweetest.